Hello, everyone. This is Dark Journalist with a very special episode for you. Dr. Joseph Farrell is back, and he's going to give us the deep dive on the covert actions around the Russian-Ukraine war and plans to remove President Biden through committee maneuvers, plus the real reasons for the planned destruction of the American economy through permanent war emergency powers.
We've been caught red-handed developing bioweapons in a foreign country on the borders of another foreign country. To me, Daniel, this is another indicator that as far as the Russians are concerned, the gloves are going to come off.
Please join us now. But Joseph, it's great to have you back.
Thanks for having me here, Daniel. I'm thrilled to be here in more ways than one.
So many of us are just happy that you're doing well and coming back so strong after everything that you went through.
Yeah, it was an unusual experience. They finally had to put a stent in my heart. They ran a balloon up through arteries in my arm or something, and I'm laying there, kind of drugged up, feeling all of this going on. It was an unusual experience, to say the least.
What everyone wants to know is, how are you doing?
Well, I'm okay. I can definitely tell I've been through a heart attack. I don't have the energy I used to. I can definitely tell that. So anyway, I've seen American healthcare from the inside, and I'm not liking what I see. For the most part, I'm not saying that my cardiologist and that team is not good. So anyway,
unbelievable. And I've been noticing your output. You've been, for someone who just went through this experience, you've been doing a lot. So
well, I was counseled just to take it easy and, don't worry about the website. It'll still be there whenever you decide to start it. And I'm sitting around here, for a couple months after the heart attack, more or less falling asleep all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's been the other part of this. It's been very bizarre because right after the attack, I would just nod off.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally just decided this is nuts. I've got to do something. So I decided to start back with the blogging and stuff, which, I'm doing as much as I can do, but I've cut back a lot, and probably
it's the stimulation of work.
Yeah.
I hear you. Well, it's been outstanding, and we're all glad you're doing better.
Thank you. I am too. And I'm very serious. I want to thank everybody for their prayers, because I'm quite convinced I wouldn't have made it without those. I'm quite convinced of that.
Incredible. It's an incredible experience.
Yeah, it really was. It really was.
While a lot of that in your recovery was taking place, boom, we go into a war with Ukraine and Russia. And you've pointed out some really interesting things lately. What I wanted to start off with is this Russian politician, Zhirinovsky.
Mm-hmm.
And, he was always raised back in the 90s and the early 2000s. He was going to be the threat to take over against Yeltsin. He was the hard right, version over there. But recently he came out and said there will be no America by 2024. And he was making all these kind of heavy duty things in terms of coming in with the war and really beating Ukraine and all this. And then he died.
Conveniently.
Yes.
Yeah.
And at his funeral, Putin was there with the nuclear football. What do you think of all that, and what was going on with him and raising him as a figure? Now, he'd been out there, but he was kind of obscure. What was the messaging there?
The messaging is this, and it's something that people in the West had better wake up to. Russia, the Soviet Union and Russia never really did fully buy into the doctrine of mutually assured destruction. So that's the first thing to get through people's minds.
Right.
Is they certainly believe a nuclear war would be bad and terrible and all the things but they do not think, as far as I can tell, that it would be a humanity ending event.
Mm-hmm.
It might come mighty close, but that's the first thing to take away from it. The second thing to take away from it is Zhirinovsky may be right, given the Brandonenko regime over here and its galloping, somersaulting incompetence. There may not be a United States in 2 or 3 years.
Wow.
Who knows? And I'm very serious about that, because you're seeing more and more states jumping onto the bullion depository or bullion law bandwagon. And we just saw Russia, do that to the sanctions regime by putting a floor on gold prices and taking off the value added tax on bullion sales in Russia, and then demanding everybody pay in rubles, or we'll take gold too. Either one, that's okay. So, the reserve currency status of the dollar, at least as far as a monopoly on that status, I think those days are quickly coming to a close. In other words, we may have a situation where it will be more or less like what obtained after World War I, with both sterling and the dollar kind of functioning as reserve currencies for a period of time prior to World War II. I think you're going to see kind of a multipolar reserve currency world emerge. You're going to have the euro, you're going to have the dollar, the yuan perhaps, or some special basket of currencies. But I think you're going to see the monopoly on that status, as far as the dollar is concerned, simply disappear. And that, I think that's fast coming down the pike.
So this action of placing NATO on their doorstep is backfiring.
Oh, totally. I mean, Kissinger, love him or hate him, but even Kissinger was saying that this is just a bad idea. Expanding NATO into Russia will respond, and they were saying, the old guard was saying this all along, and nobody was. What the problem is we've got a bunch of young Turks that think they're smarter than the old guard. Right. Plus, a lot of the old guard, David Rockefeller and Zbigniew Brzezinski and people like that are simply dead. They're not around to rein in all of this insanity. And you've got people like Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton and that whole crowd that think they're smarter than the old guard, and they're not. They're essentially stupid. So this is the other problem, and Russia, I called that one wrong. Let's go back and remember that I was predicting Putin won't do it because it'll be too expensive, for him to pull off. Well, I got that one wrong. Mm-hmm. But now that he's there, as far as I can tell, you can't believe anything either country is saying about what's going on there. But I do think that the Russians are winning for the simple reason that the hysteria coming out of the Ukrainian government, we need a no-fly zone yesterday, and we need those MiGs, and, we need this, and that means they're losing, folks. Right. And, I feel sorry for the Ukrainians in a certain sense, because they were stupid enough to believe the promises of Mr. Globaloney. Yeah. This country is like perfide Albion. And that is when the British Empire, the United States, wants to fight, somebody like Russia, they always pick a proxy to do it for them. They never do it themselves.
Yes.
We will fight the Kaiser till the last drop of French blood. That sort of thing.
Right.
So, yeah.
It's amazing. There were all these things about the negotiation around the pipeline, how Germany was on board with this, and how Trump was like, hey, if you do that, You'll basically be at Russia's mercy and all the rest. And a lot of that seems like it's come to pass. But this globalist force that has been moving into Ukraine, did they want this? Did they want him to come in? Putin?
Well, I think to a certain extent they did. What I don't think, again, we're dealing with people that think they're colossally smart and in fact they're colossally stupid. So I think they wanted him to go into the Ukraine. I don't think they were expecting him to go in the way he did. You know, let's observe what Russia has done here, because it's very clever. If you look at the tanks, the equipment that the Russians are using, they're not using their frontline stuff. They're using old Soviet era stuff. Let's use that and get rid of it. You know, it's basically the
recycling program.
Yeah, it's the recycling program. You know, it's what they did to the Germans when the Germans invaded in 1941. Use all the old stuff and, you know, keep the T-34s and the KV-1s in reserve. Maybe use a few of them, but get rid of the old stuff. And that's exactly what they did. So I'm looking at this as a very clever invasion. They are using 1/3 the resources of the Ukraine. If the Ukraine thinks they're going to win a conventional war against Russia, think again, ain't going to happen. You know, Russia has its logistical bases close to hand. You know, all of the stuff that you can think of. And on top of this, I don't think that Mr. Globaloni reckoned on the response to the sanctions regime that Russia has just hit us with.
Yes.
I don't think they were expecting that to happen at all. Now, if they were paying attention, you know, and the fact that Russia's been buying gold like crazy and trying to put into place its own financial clearing systems and so on and so forth, you know, this was predictable. The last time we hit the Russians with a sanctions regime and the Japanese turned around and told the Russians, oh, you can use our credit card clearing system. You know, which they did. You know, that was years ago. So Russia's been building out the infrastructure to, you know, basically bypass SWIFT altogether. So we should have seen this coming. And again, I don't think Mr. Globaloni saw it coming. So now they've managed to cripple American energy production and to cripple the, you know, the reserve currency status of the dollar mightily. I mean, who's going to trust us now that we have seized another country's assets?
Yeah.
You know, who's going to trust us? Answer: nobody. Goose eggs.
Right.
About the only thing that is weird in this whole thing is the British came out and announced, oh, by the way, we just found a big pool of natural gas under the North Sea, and it's all ours. You know? So, you know, if I'm poor Germany, I'm thinking, okay, it's either Great Britain or Russia. Who are we going to pick? You know, and they were in that position, it seems to me, like not too long ago. So, you know, this whole thing's a mess. The West is going to get reamed ultimately, I think, by all of this.
Amazing. The speed at which things happened on this, and you know, Russia built up some troops on that border, and it was pretty clear something was going on. We were still hanging back on it, and you know, then this whole thing about biolabs came up after this war started in earnest, and at first, there were all these denials about things, but then Victoria Nuland comes out and says, well, maybe there are materials there.
Maybe we were just doing a little anthrax research there, but it's perfectly harmless. And yeah, there may be some Fauci connections, but that's just purely coincidental. We don't need to worry about any of that, you know, because we're good people. We would never do anything wrong. You know, I mean, come on.
Miss Neocon herself.
Yeah, Miss Neocon, F the EU herself. You know, this is a lady I'm in a big rush to trust. But it's just, you know, the amazing thing about this is, you know, if you really paid attention to the Russian invasion and the placement of these biolabs, it was like they were making a beeline for them.
Oh, right.
And when they got in there, they got their documents, and then all of a sudden, oh, we're retreating now.
Right. Yeah. You had all those shots of the Russian soldiers going into the supermarkets and then like taking off,
Right. Yeah,
Doesn't
exactly.
exactly look like a big frontal assault there.
Yeah, no. And the way the Western media, as far as I can tell, has been covering this is, if it weren't for the fact that people's lives are being lost, this would be a Ma and Pa Kettle movie from the 1930s.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Right.
it's hilarious. I just don't see the Ukrainian armed forces doing this number on the Russians that everybody says they're doing. I just don't.
Yeah. This is part of the illusion, the big propaganda. Here comes Zelensky,
right?
The hero, actor, comedian,
and Soros shill.
Yes.
This is the other part of this. There's this story going around. I just talked with Catherine about this. There's this story going around, Daniel, that the Russians actually took out an arrest warrant on George Soros. Now, this has been floating around on the internet for a few years, but it surfaced again, okay? And I'm thinking, all right, if I'm the Russians, why not?
Mm-hmm.
Why not take out an arrest warrant on the guy? He's messed around in their backyard in the Ukraine and put in this comedian nutcase, and they are sponsoring all of these neo-Nazi brigades, Azov and so on and so forth.
Right. How does that make any sense?
Yeah. It doesn't. It doesn't. And I'm not saying there's bad history that the Russians have with the Ukrainians. There certainly is, because of the famine, the purges, and so on and so forth. So, there's bad blood on both sides.
Oh, yeah.
But this whole business with Zelensky and the Russians taking out this arrest warrant, to me, I actually think there may be some truth to that, because I think what's going to happen, and I said this to Catherine as a result of all of this, is the Russians are going to take off the gloves as far as covert ops. Right. I think the Soros arrest thing is really a message saying, if you guys are going to start talking about us going and using cyber war and shutting down the internet and turning off your power, okay.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to start doing the wet works operations. And
wow.
That's exactly what I think is, if we're going to start talking regime change, so are they.
Right.
And God help Mr. Biden and co. Because you cannot tell me for a moment that the Russians probably don't have a copy of the laptop and quite a few other things.
Right, yeah.
That they can just release into the ether and just magically see where it might go.
Don't worry, CNN will be there to say, oh, it's misinformation.
CNN will be right there to say it's misinformation, virtually putting the stamp of approval and authenticity on
it. You put out some interesting entries on this whole thing about the media suddenly acknowledging the laptop.
Yeah.
And we know the story of the laptop. It came up strangely late in the 2020 election, late October, and Twitter knocked it down. They stopped the New York Post from putting it out there. All the major outlets shut it down. 51 intelligence officials said it was Russian disinformation, the whole bit. And now New York Times, Washington Post, everybody, oh, it turns out it's legitimate after all.
Yeah. Oops.
And you said it reminded you of how in 2016 they have avoided the Roy Cohn connection to Trump.
Oh, yeah.
Interestingly enough.
And they're still not talking about it.
I know they'll throw everything else at them, but they won't touch that.
They won't touch that one with a 10-foot pole, and I'm thinking, why?
Yeah.
Talk about a tailor-made story that if you want to embroil Trump in some embarrassment, trot out that one, for crying out loud.
Cohn had decades of activity.
Well, you're the one that's coined the phrase, which I picked up, that he's the original swamp creature, which I just love because it's true. and they've let this go. So the only thing I can think of, Daniel, is why now are they giving any credence to the laptop? And the only thing I can think of is they are in, Biden is just a complete disaster.
Mhm.
I mean, this man is so venally evil that he has made a career out of the family grift for over 4 decades.
Mhm.
And all of that, there are spiritual consequences to a life like that. And one of them is losing your mind.
Mhm.
I mean, this man has lost his mind, and I don't write it down to his age. I don't write it down to senility. I don't write it down to high cholesterol, or it's a spiritual phenomenon you're looking at. This man is nuts.
Yeah.
He is wacko.
Yeah.
He is a criminal.
Mhm.
And I think that the handwriting is even apparent to the corrupt leadership in the swamp, and they realize they've got to get rid of the man. So it's full tilt now.
This is part of the operation.
This is part of the operation to get rid of him. I suspect what they're going to do is they're going to get rid of Kamala first. They're going to appoint Barack to be the vice president, and then they're going to get rid of Joe Biden. And wonder of wonders, we get Barack Obama again.
Oh, fascinating.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm all for that, because I've just seen firsthand what a wonderful job he did with healthcare in this country. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, he was taking some kind of victory lap. This is his first visit to the White House.
Uh-huh.
He goes in there and he's taking over as president, and Kamala's right beside him, and
Uh-huh.
Biden's hanging out in the back, and everyone's seeing him wander around. And Biden's the president, and nobody's paying
any attention to it. Well, it's like that YouTube video, The Poetry of Joe Biden, with the guy smoking a cigarette, and nobody, rightfully, no one's paying any attention to him. I mean, the man's a disaster. I turn him off.
This on the American people.
Yeah.
This incompetent person who was half there, and they're definitely using drugs to keep him conscious enough to go to that pedestal.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have to wonder if they revived Dr. Gerstner, Hitler's old doctor. Because, Biden is just shambling along, and it's everything he touches is turning to a disaster. And quite frankly, I don't think they're going to recover the brand name of their party for a very long time.
Wow.
After this, I really don't, and that's bad too.
Yeah.
So I don't see any good way out of this.
In the background, Trump 2024 is rising.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not voting for him again.
Right. But this is the strange cycle that we see going on. What's happening there? Because Trump has also stepped in at getting so behind the vaccine part as his big legacy, which is remarkable when people really close to him have said, hey, this is not your issue. All these other things are.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, that, the polls on his side, all the things, the J6 thing in the committees, just going around trying to subpoena somebody and get Trump in trouble. What are we looking at there? Because we see Biden on one hand going down, the Trump force is rising. So these people are figuring out we need to depose Biden and put a popular figure in there before we get to this point.
Right. I frankly, at this stage, don't think that they've acted soon enough. In other words, let's assume that they managed somehow to get rid of Mr. Biden by November. I don't think it's soon enough, because it's the party brand itself that is rancid and rotten, and everybody sees it. Even diehard Democrats see it.
Right.
It's the party brand. Now, that said, I personally don't think, and this is just me, maybe it's wishful thinking on my part, I don't know, because I don't spend, Daniel, a lot of time reviewing polls, and in fact, I've cut down significantly on the amount of attention I pay to the American media. But my impression is that Mr. Trump's support within the Republican Party is probably not as solid as he might think it is. I think, number one, DeSantis has really thrown a curveball into that whole operation. And he's a tremendously popular governor. Love him or hate him, at least he knows how to play politics. And he has something going for him that Trump does not, and that is he is willing to fight, and he's not so willing to listen to the technocrat advisors as Trump was.
Right.
The other problems that Trump has, he's got Abbott in the wings in Texas, governors like that.
Mm-hmm.
Kristi Noem, in my opinion, is kind of faded, and again, rightly so. But Trump, I don't think, is nearly as solid as he may think he is. I'm with Foursquare with Catherine Fitz here. You don't shut down the economy and throw millions of middle-class people into bankruptcy for a flu.
Right.
That's my problem with it.
Yeah, he's boxed himself in, and when he was doing that, he did that tour with Bill O'Reilly.
Yes.
O'Reilly was saying, hey, you need to put these things, your accomplishments, right square center. And once Bill O'Reilly became his advisor, it seemed like, the thing that his crowd, his supporters actually want from him seemed to start to dim.
Yes.
His ability to stick it. And, trying to make up for it by using 4-letter words isn't going to cut it.
No, it will not. It will not cut it. And the other thing that Trump's tried that rally a few weeks ago in Alabama, and he was booed at the point that he started talking about the vaccine.
Right.
And you can tell it kind of took him by surprise.
Yeah.
But it didn't take him enough by surprise that the significance of what had just happened registered with him. So I think again, he's not being very politic, playing his chances here. I don't know who the Republican nominee in 2024 is going to be, but I would not be a bit surprised if you see the Republicans running off against DeSantis and Abbott. I don't think Trump is going to last that long in terms of his support. You've already got too many people commenting on Trump and the vaccine issue. And, that's still 2 years away for that whole issue to grow and take root in people's minds. So I don't see Trump having that much of a shot.
Yeah, it's interesting. And it's interesting how they play Romney out there.
Mittens. Yeah.
It's almost like they want to open up a third party idea to thwart any sort of resurgence of a Trump or a Trump style candidate.
Right. Yeah. I don't think that we're all that far from a third party, but I don't think that trying to split the Republicans is going to work. The party that is in danger of losing its brand name are the Democrats.
Yeah.
And they're going to have to do something with the radical wing of that party, or they're going to go the way of the Whigs.
Yeah. Yeah.
They really are,
that wing has established so much power.
Right.
In everything from sex education to kids to the whole gender identity thing, locked into a big pharmaceutical giveaway, grab away.
Right.
And it's fascinating because on the foreign policy side, the administration has had nothing but disaster after disaster.
Right.
Even the polls that favor them are showing them in the low 30s, right? So, I mean, that's hard to do when...
It's hard to beat Millard Fillmore and John Tyler in the incompetence department. And he has somehow managed to do it.
So the only thing he can hope for is rule by emergency.
Right.
So therefore, the emergency, we've seen it on the medical side. They've pulled that. The emergency, they could pull with a gigantic cyber attack coming from Russia. Oh, those damn Russians. Mm-hmm. They went into Ukraine and now they took us down. It's a cyber war. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think they're definitely prepping the narrative for a cyber war, but I don't believe it for a minute.
No.
If anything like that happens, it's coming right out of Langley, and it's coming right out of Swampington, D.C. It's coming right out of Wall Street. Blame, the government of this current country is irretrievably wicked, corrupt, and evil. There, it's on the record. It is not redeemable. Okay.
Right.
I put nothing past them because they are desperate to hold on to their power. I put nothing past these people. The problem is it gives Russia, and these people don't even realize it. The problem is it gives Russia maneuvering room.
Yes.
There is such a thing as penetrated operations. I wrote a whole book on 9/11 about the idea.
Yes.
So they're giving the Russians maneuvering room. So while Langley's cooking up its cyber warfare false flag attacks that they're going to blame on Russia, who's to say that Russia might not sneak in a few real items into that whole scenario, including, oh, Mr. Soros, we're so sorry that you lost all of your communications. What a shame. And you lost your helicopter mechanic? Well, what a pity, they don't realize they are playing into the covert warfare handbook, and the Russians know how that game's played, and they will play it.
Yeah.
They will play it.
Yeah. And they're an incredible team for that type of activity.
Well, we've got to remember, this Ukrainian war is about Russia sensing that NATO and the West are, number one, not agreement capable, and number two, posing an existential threat to the Russian nation and civilization itself. That's the way the Russians are viewing this. So they're not going to play around.
Right.
Like it or not, they are not going to play around. They are going to play hardball until we get the message, leave them alone and let them do their thing.
Right. Would you say the Ukraine is sort of being set up to be the capital of the New World Order?
I wouldn't say that they're being set up to be the capital of the New World Order, but I would say that they're being set up to be the money laundering capital of the New World.
Yeah, right.
Oh, easily.
Yeah.
Easily. Because if you look at the sheer corruption of the Ukrainian government, especially after the American-led coup, against the Yankovic back in 2014, if you look at that whole situation, the corruption in that government is astonishing. So I think they're a human trafficking hub. I think they're a drug money laundering hub and all sorts of other money laundering hubs. They're clearly involved up to their wazoo in biowarfare research with the pentagram.
Yeah.
And let's remember something else about the Ukraine invasion and the biolabs. Back in 2008, when the Russians invaded South Ossetia, you saw the same allegations of biolabs peppering Georgia and places around that area as well. And the Russians went in and cleaned it out. So, as far as I can tell, there's a pattern here of Russian response to what they are perceiving, rightly or wrongly, but this is the way they're perceiving it, as a threat to their existence.
Mm-hmm.
So, Russia's going to respond hard, and the sanctions regime and everything else that they're pushing now, and just the sheer off-the-wall rhetoric that we see going on, I don't see the Russians responding now in nearly the tame, restrained fashion that they have thus far. It's going to get very bad.
We've never been at a low point like this with the Russians. I mean, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis, 13 days.
Mm-hmm.
And, during World War II, of course, we acted as allies.
Mm-hmm. Well, we had a little problem called Hitler to deal with.
Yeah, I'll do it.
A little problem.
When we look at this, and we know there was the Reagan heavy, strong rhetoric, evil empire in the early 80s. And then he gets together with Gorbachev. They bring the nuclear reductions in. They talk about a zero option, which is always interesting and hanging out there in history. And you've pointed it out before. Well, if they were willing to give it up, they had something else
right.
they were going to use instead. But how do we find ourselves about 40 years out from, or more like 35 years out from the Reagan-Gorbachev agreements, in this situation where we're basically at the doorstep of World War III with Russia?
We'd better be hoping that all of that secret black hidden finance money and the research it was buying or supposedly buying was getting good investment returns on the dollar. We'd better be hoping. Here's the problem. Our equipment costs, what we're getting for our dollar, our defense dollar, is far less than what the Russians are getting for their defense rubles. In other words, prices here are inflated dramatically, and we're not getting efficient returns. Just think of the Raptor, the F whatever it is, fighter plane that's performance is so bad for the buck that was spent on it.
Oh, yeah.
In addition to this, Russia has been upgrading its thermonuclear forces. So now they have all of these hypersonic missiles, which incidentally, you'll notice we haven't been looking at in the Ukraine. All of that stuff is magically gone.
I know.
We're watching, Warsaw Pact equipment from the late 1970s. Yeah, and the Ukrainians still can't win. When they outnumber the Russians 3-1, and they've got the latest NATO equipment. This is not looking too good as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
But it's kind of looking like, I don't know, maybe Stalingrad circa February of 1943. But it's just amazing to me that they're putting out this line that the Ukrainians are just trouncing the Russians, and Russia is having all of these difficulties now, and blah, blah, blah. I'm not seeing it. I'm sorry. I'm not buying it. So where are we? Well, we'd better be hoping that those kinetic weapons are already up there and ready to go. Because if this does get into a shooting war with Russia, they will not hesitate to use everything that they have, including the kitchen sink. Just ask one N. Bonaparte or A. Hitler. They will not, because they perceive this as an existential threat, and that's where we have profoundly miscalculated. And when the Ukraine started talking about, let's go nuclear,
that was unbelievable. That's probably what triggered the entire thing. And can you blame the Russians? We were willing to do it when the Russians stuck missiles in Cuba. Sure.
Why would the Russians go along with an independent NATO nuclear deterrent right on their border?
It's unbelievable that they brought that. And there was an agreement with Bush and Gorbachev saying we won't go east. And
right.
Said, okay, Gorbachev said you can reunite Germany then, no problem.
Right. And here we are.
Yeah.
We have broken every single one of those promises that we made. Every single one. Not just a few. Every single one. So is it any reason? Is there any rational doubt as to why Russia has done this? They were sending signals that, you keep pushing us and sooner or later we're going to have to act. Well, now they've acted. And unfortunately, I think you're correct that Mr. Globaloney did try and goad them into this, which they were eventually successful in doing. I didn't think that Putin would bite, and so I was wrong on that. But I don't think Mr. Globaloney was calculating not only on the measure of the Russian response now with buying gas in either rubles or gold, but the degree to which the rest of the world is backing Russia and not the United States.
It's unbelievable.
It is truly unbelievable.
Staunch ally, India.
Yes. India. That's, we could not have played this any more incompetently or badly. The only real winner in Mr. Globaloney's set is not the United States, it's Great Britain.
How does that work?
Well, because again, they came out and made that wonderful announcement that, oh, by the way, we just found this big natural gas deposit under the North Sea. Isn't that convenient? Right in the nick of time, too, right after Russia invaded the Ukraine. How about that? Yeah, right.
Wow. China's been hanging out there, and we've had some pretend talk from this administration against China, but we all know that China is the puppeteer of a lot of this administration, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
In a major way, and may have thought, hey, we'll take over right through these guys. But just dealing with the kind of geopolitics as it stands in the public world, China's position is interesting because what they seem to be saying is, we're going to stay out of it. And if anything, they're backing up Russia as well.
Right.
So in effect, we're kind of isolated in our look. The world, everyone, Russia's invaded Ukraine. This big country has invaded this little sovereign country, and all that PR that goes with it. And they propaganda the daylights out of Americans with this. And they have the ripped T-shirt of Zelensky, and there's no mention of all the billionaires and Kolomoisky and the people behind him putting him up there in the first place. So we're getting almost like the movie version of this thing. How does Russia get out of Ukraine? How do we get out of this mess with Russia?
Well, boy, that's a great question. And Daniel, I honestly don't know, but we're not going to get out of it with the current administration.
Right.
In other words, there has to be, and we've got to remember the Russian attitude now toward America. The Russians have called, for a couple of years now, have called the United States not agreement capable. And it's about as strong of it's one word in the Russian. And it's a very, very strong term. And what they mean by that is there is absolutely no sense in trying to talk or negotiate with this country because it's run by a bunch of crooks and liars. It's and recently Russia has taken to calling us the empire of lies.
Wow.
That's how strongly they view this. And we need to remember something. Vladimir Putin, whatever you think of him, he has not initiated purges against his own population. He has not opened up gulags and deported civilian populations in their thousands, if not tens and hundreds of thousands. He has not made Russia into a one-party state. So in other words, you can take all of this business about Vladimir Putin being another Joseph Stalin and toss it right out the window.
Right.
Now, he may be authoritarian and all of that good stuff, but he is not a Stalinist at all. So we need a fundamental reassessment of the way we view Russia, because they view us now as so systemically corrupt that it's impossible to deal with us. Wow. That's a bad, this is worse by far than anything we were facing with Brezhnev or Kosygin or Khrushchev or any of that Soviet leadership, even Andropov. It was never this bad with the Soviet Union because they didn't have that view of us.
Right.
And we were not as corrupt as we have become. So for us to correct things with Russia, we have to basically clean out the swamp and change our strategic game. And I don't see that happening within the next decade. It doesn't matter if the Republicans or the Commie-crats are in power because they're both part of the swamp.
Yeah, exactly.
Just listen to Lindsey Graham Cracker and all the nonsense that he's been spouting with vis-a-vis Russia. You know, the man,
Assassinate Putin?
yeah, assassinating Putin.
What on earth?
Yeah, you know, the last time a foreign leader, you know, at that level was assassinated was Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and we know what the result of that was.
That's how you get into your world wars.
That's how you get into your world wars, right?
Incredible.
Assassinate the Russian president. Good idea, Lindsay.
The repercussions from this kind of standoff with Russia, which is beyond, beyond their rhetoric. I mean, they brought us to a point where the wrong move, setting off the wrong missile, whatever, would bring us into direct conflict. And they have, countries like Poland playing footsie right on the edge. They're ridiculous. With no thought of their safety. It's just like, here, funnel these arms over the border, But what are the repercussions that we're looking at, the dangers with Russia? There's a nuclear exchange, which is absolutely incredibly frightening possibility right there. And with them talking about taking the football away from Biden, as you've noted.
I think they've already done that.
Oh.
And here's why. Would you trust that football right now to Joe Biden?
No.
No.
I wouldn't trust him at the wheel of a car.
Precisely. I wouldn't trust him in a go-kart at the county fair. And that goes for the rest of his family. I do not see this country, and this is the only thing that may be right now pulling our fat out of the fire, because this administration is such a joke of a puppet show. It is not Joe Biden in charge. It's probably behind the scenes, ultimately Barack Obama.
Yeah.
But whoever or whatever is in charge, it is the fact that no one knows exactly who is in charge, particularly the Russians. That means they are not going to try anything of a major strike against this country, because it is very, very difficult to decapitate the government in those circumstances. They don't know where the seat of government really is. It's not Swampington and it's not Joe Biden. But where it is, we don't know. And neither do the Russians. So that may be what's keeping our fat out of the fire, quite literally, for the moment.
Amazing. This idea that there's a rule by committee, and the Democrats themselves raised this idea of taking that nuclear football away from Biden right before he got in.
Right, I know. Yeah, I remember.
So this is something that's part of their playbook.
Right.
This committee, what would it be made up of? What would it look like?
Well, if they're going to have a committee like that, my guess is you could do it one of two ways. You could either do it through the cabinet, and have a de facto, probably Secretary of State or Secretary of Defense, somebody like that. But the cabinet itself, looking at Biden's cabinet appointments, they all seem to be as wacko nuts as he is.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, okay, if you're going to have that kind of committee, probably you're going to have a committee of people from BlackRock, representatives from BlackRock, representatives from major insurance companies, Sullivan and Cromwell on Wall Street, the usual players. In other words, you're going to have a committee of kind of like the committee that you saw in Oliver Stone's movie JFK, when you get these people talking about how they're going to take out the president. It's an informal group.
Right.
But they do have meetings and they are making plans, but they're not, they're not writing any of this down.
Right.
It's going to be something like that, I would imagine, with the usual players, BlackRock and all of the people. And particularly now that you've got Russian forces in the Ukraine, you're going to have some of those people that are sponsoring the mercenaries in the Ukraine, the Azov battalions, BlackRock again, all of those security firms involved. In other words, I think the U.S. military. I'll just be very honest here, Daniel. I think the U.S. military, as the military of the United States of America, is in fact dead.
Oh,
yeah. I think what you have, the military is being destroyed by wokeism, by vaccines. What you have in its place is a quiet shift to a corporatized committee type of operation,
right,
happening right under our eyes. And again, it's because Biden has provided them the excuse to do that, which again I think was part of the plan from the beginning when they stuck that nutcase in the White House.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't view any of this as being accidental. It's part of their plan.
Right. Oh, that is fascinating.
And yeah, it's disturbing, isn't it? Yeah,
it is.
Mm-hmm.
And the purge in the military, going through them and saying, do you hold right-wing views? Are you a Christian? Is that holding you back from having fair racial religion conversations? I mean, this is interesting to me because they were targeting these people in the military and being like, we have to make sure that if we go to move against our own population, for example, we don't have a group in there that'll turn and say, no, I'm loyal to the Constitution, forget it.
Right. Exactly. They've been angling for that for years, and in looking back on circumstances like what happened in Waco in the 90s and so on and so forth, those were kind of little trial balloons, as far as I'm concerned, to see how the military would respond to that kind of situation. They still have a huge problem in that there are enough veterans of the military services in this country that are, in my opinion, constitutionally loyal, that you've got a problem of a cadre army out there with the veterans, much like the Allies faced with the Germans after World War I. You've got 6 million Germans demobilizing that know how to fight and fight well. So you've got that problem, and that's never going to go away in this country, at least not for a generation or two. So things are not all hunky-dory for them. But as far as this misadministration is concerned, and feathering their own power and lining the pockets with more stolen money and so on and so forth, he's their man.
Yes, no question about it. And what's fascinating to me is his own Biden's own cognitive problems have him going out, like, for example, when he visited Europe and he was talking about Putin, he said, we have to remove this man from power. And instantly Blinken and these other guys said, no, he didn't mean that. I mean, just the position alone, he'll talk us into World War III if he's not there.
Yeah.
So they know that.
Yes, they do. And the other thing is, this only works against the United States, because if the head of state is saying absurd things that have to be walked back every 5 minutes, no one's going to take this government seriously.
Right.
And why should they? Why should the French or the Germans or the Italians or any of our major allies, why should any of them take it seriously? They can't. And this is a problem that, again, it's now endemic. It's affected the Democratic Party brand.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't matter if Barack Obama gets in there again. They have so ruined their brand that allies are going to think twice about trusting us. Just look at Japan. Japan was and still is, as far as I'm concerned, has decided that, the United States is no longer a reliable ally. We're going to continue to talk like they are and to act like they are.
But they're talking about developing nukes.
Oh, yeah, I know they are.
What on earth?
And gee, I wonder why. Maybe they concluded that, who's got the American nuclear football? Is it that guy? Well, that guy doesn't know what day it is. Right. Can we trust him? Exactly. So, the Japanese have looked at the tea leaves and drawn the right conclusions. Can't blame them.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
if the Japanese are, it's not going to be long before, well, Germany, Poland, anybody in Europe that's a turnkey nuclear power looking at this situation, and that includes Sweden, that includes Holland, these little countries that can become nuclear powers if they want to. I'm not seeing that this is a situation that's good for the United States in the long run. The only thing that's going to pull our bacon out of the fire is a total house cleaning in the swamp, which I don't see happening, or the country cracks apart into insane half and sane half. That's all I can see.
It's the secession is built in.
The secession, I mean, how many states does it take for us to realize that we're facing a financial problem, and states are waking up to the fact that the federal government may not be around to pull their fat out of the fire?
Yeah.
More and more, Alabama just became yet another state considering removing tax on bullion.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I know that DeSantis basically asked, I'm going to install my own army using normal Florida state regulations for National Guard and everything else. But they hadn't done that before.
No.
And I thought this is a move that says, you know what, if you're going to try to lay this stuff on us, we're going to have a fighting force ready to boot you out.
Right. Yeah. This is a Pierre Beauregard moment.
Amazing. Right.
It's not just Florida that's doing this. Governor Abbott in Texas is taking similar steps with his immigration crisis. And the problem is, if you look at it, these states are doing these things because the federal government is increasingly weak, incompetent, corrupt, and unable to get anything done.
Right. Yeah.
It's run its course.
Mm-hmm.
And again, if you're an American ally and you're looking at this cartoon going on over here, what do you think?
They're very nervous.
Well, of course they are, for good reason.
Yeah.
Because we're not going to be around, to pull their fat out of the fire. They're going to have to do it themselves. Look what's happening in France. Marine Le Pen is leading Emmanuel Macron in the French presidential election.
And of course, she goes back to the hard right Nazi.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And she has done a very good job to take her father's party and distance it from that hard right stance. But that doesn't mean that it's not still there.
Latent inside the centrist.
Yes, exactly. So you have to reach a certain pass of frustration for that party to be in that position vis-a-vis the French electorate. That tells you how fed up they are. Wow. And can you blame them? No. The same thing's going to happen in Germany eventually. Schultz, as far as I can tell, is just kind of Merkel light.
Yeah, right. Not exactly an inspiration.
No, he's not exactly an inspiration, So you look at the rest of Europe, none of them are looking too good. None of them can be looking at this country with anything else other than trepidation. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens.
Your old classmate Boris Johnson. He came along and he said, "You know what? I'm getting rid of all of the restrictions I put on everyone." And everyone was shocked, of course, when he initially did it, because he went along with this big left liberal thing happening in the UK to make going to the grocery store a crime. And suddenly he lets the whole thing go. Snap of a finger.
Yeah.
This part is interesting to me when they just let it out and they're like, you know what? In New York State, you know what? No more restrictions. Forget about it.
Uh-huh.
So they get to a point, the polling data comes back, and they're like, we can't push it anymore. We're looking too bad moving into this 2020 election. We'll lose the ability to even create the illusion that we have some,
sanity.
That's really what it's about.
Yes, that's really what it's about.
You move into 2022 and the Republicans control, let's say, Congress and the Senate. Mm-hmm. Then you've got investigations of Fauci. You got the Hunter Biden laptop investigations. I mean, it's all hell on the other team.
Which I think needs to happen. But if the Republicans think that they're going to get in there, and this is my frustration with the Republican Party, and it has been since Senator Taft in 1952, which kind of dates me, but the Republicans get in there, they get these majorities, and then they don't do anything.
Right.
They just don't have any testicular fortitude. So if the Republicans think that they're going to be able to get control of Congress and launch all these investigations, fine. The investigations need to be launched, they need to be had, and these people need to go to jail. Mm-hmm. Okay? If not, some of them dangle from the end of a rope. Okay?
Right. Well, hey, they put in the anti-lynching laws.
I know. We better maybe make that illegal.
You got to wonder about that one.
You got to wonder about that one. Just what are they sensing out there in their polling data that we're not privy to?
It's like no lynching, especially politicians.
And no lynching, especially politicians, especially if they're in D.C. at the time.
Joseph, unbelievable insight and analysis. Now let's go another hour and figure out how space and the UFO file are tied directly into this. Part 2 will be up at darkjournalist.com shortly. Sign up for our newsletter to make sure you get it first. Of course, Dr. Farrell's work is available at gizadeathstar.com. Join us for the X series, Fridays at 8 p.m. See you soon.